Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Susanna and this is my March reading wrap-up. In March I read 8 books. The first book I read is Of Love and Beer. It's a debut novel by indie author Amanda Darcy. I was an ARC reader, so unfortunately I don't have a physical copy of it yet. Of Love and Beer is a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. The main character Ellis Bourne is a craft brewer. She has 2 problems: trying to avoid the suitors her matchmaking mother thrusts upon her and trying to find a new business partner for her craft beer brewery. But luckily for her, she knows that she can always trust her first impressions. So when she meets a handsome vintner, Dean Pembroke, who insults her, she knows exactly what to think of him. That is, until Dean's friend shows interest in her business and she's stuck trying to avoid Dean while trying to get his friend invest in her small town brewery. The story is told from a dual point of view, and it is full of witty and fun banter and enough twists and surprises to keep even a seasoned Jane Austen fan on their toes. I found the setting fascinating and the author has clearly done her research on craft beer industry. There is a lot of info on beer brewing, but to the author's credit, it never feels like an info dump, but rather paints a vivid picture of the interests of the main character. When it comes to characterization, I love what the author does to Austen's characters. Ellis and Dean are both a pleasure to read, and there are some characters like Aunt Constance who become more likable than Austen's version. However, there were a few characters I would have liked to see fleshed out more. In Pride and Prejudice, Jane's demure character makes perfect sense, but in this setting I would have liked to see more backstory for Chasey to explain why she doesn't show more overt interest in Ben. Wallace, who is the Mr. Collins in this book, is an obnoxious know-it-all, and it doesn't really make sense why Lucy would start dating him. There is one other character who calls him sweet, but we really never see that sweetness in action. It would have been nice to see him have at least some redeeming qualities, even though he is not the right partner in business or romantic sense for Ellis. There are a few other minor issues that can be probably chalked up to the fact that this is a debut novel. There is a little bit too much telling rather than showing, for example, what Ellis thinks about her parents' relationship. And there are also too many named characters who you only meet once and don't play a major role in the narrative. But these were really minor issues and did not detract me from enjoying the novel. I rarely like contemporary romance, but this book definitely deserves the 5 stars I'm giving it. So if you're a fan of Jane Austen retellings or just simply like fun, witty, contemporary, kids-only romances, then this book is definitely for you. If you want to learn more about the book or the author, I've interviewed Amanda in my blog. I have the link in the description, so check that out if you're interested. The second book I read is The Midwife by Tricia Cresswell. This is also a debut novel. It's a historical fiction set in early Victorian England. In 1838, a woman is found naked and near death on the Northumberland moors. She has no memory of who she is, but she can still remember how to help a woman in labor. She's named Joanna, later Mrs. Sharp, and becomes a nurse and a midwife in the village of Alnwick. In an alternate timeline a few years later in London, Dr. Borthwick lives a solitary life working as a male midwife, helping mothers in the elegant homes of the high society and volunteering in the slums of the Devil's Acre. The Midwife is well-written and interesting historical fiction. The characters are likable, and the book paints a vivid picture of what it was like to live as a woman in the early Victorian England. The way the 2 characters' lives converge was well done, and even though the plot twist was a bit predictable towards the middle of the book, it was an interesting one. The author is a retired doctor, so you can be sure that the medical details are right, and she clearly has done a lot of research to get the historical details correct as well. There are points where the story feels a bit repetitive, as there are so many female characters that are basically dealing with the same issues of pregnancy and childbirth. A content warning is in place as there are depictions of sexual abuse, rape, incest, and child abuse. The descriptions of the underbelly of Victorian society, the lack of women's rights, and how women were treated as medical professionals make this book occasionally a harrowing read. Despite its merit in the historical depiction, this book was a very frustrating read. The story is set up as a mystery, but the resolution is lacking. The main character doesn't do anything to solve the mystery of who she is, and 10 pages before the end of the book we know as much of her as we did 10 pages into the book. In the end, the mystery is solved in a rushed manner when the main character tells in a letter what she has learned. Her discovery is told, not shown to the reader. Since she does nothing to solve the mystery, she lacks a clear goal and motivation and character arc. To make matters worse, an epilogue adds a completely unnecessary paranormal element to the story. This element doesn't come as a total surprise, as there are hints throughout the story, but they are so subtle that I was hoping I was just reading too much into it. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and the final twist was a huge letdown. So in conclusion, The Midwife is a great historical fiction but fails as a mystery. I would have preferred if this book had been a purely historical fiction, or else that the paranormal elements had been present throughout the story. In either case, the mystery should have been executed better. I considered giving this book 4 stars because I did enjoy the historical fiction aspects, but the ending was so disappointing that I'm giving this 3 stars. If you simply like to read a depiction of Victorian women's lives, you probably enjoy this book, but if you want a well-plotted mystery, this isn't it. One of my goals this year was to read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, and I sort of did. The problem is that this is not the War and Peace that people usually talk about when they say War and Peace. The small print on the cover says that this is a first version, and unfortunately I did not think that I needed to learn about the publication history behind War and Peace before choosing which translation to read. So basically, Tolstoy wrote the first version of War and Peace in 1866 and published it in a serialized form. He didn't like the ending, so he later rewrote it, and that version was published in 1869. So the 1869 version is what people usually refer to when they talk about War and Peace, and that is also the most commonly translated version. So this first version has some differences to the 1869 version. The ending is different, some characters do not die in this version. The ending is also a lot shorter, and I think that there are also some smaller differences, like there's quite a lot of repetition that I noticed here, and also some awkward things, which meant that while I was reading this, it felt like I was almost reading the first draft of a book. So I'll probably have to read War and Peace again, or at least read the longer ending. The rest of the books are translations of ancient Greek and Latin works. The first is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is a collection of diary-type entries or short aphorisms written by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. If you're interested in learning about Stoic philosophy, this is a great starting point. The next book is The Complete Plays by Sophocles. This is a Signet Classics edition, which has all the 7 surviving plays by Sophocles. So besides the Oedipus cycle, which is Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone, it also has Ajax, Electra, Philoctetes, and the Women of Trachis. The last one of these details the events of the death of Heracles. I enjoyed the translations in this edition, and the book also has a great afterword and notes for theatrical productions. The next is a prose translation of Homer's Odyssey. This is based on Victor Perrault's edition from 1920s. That particular edition considers a lot of things in Odyssey as later additions or interpolations, and they are left out from this translation. But otherwise this was a very readable translation. I also read 2 shorter translations. The other one is the 6th book of Homer's Odyssey, and the other one is the 1st book of Virgil's Aeneid. These both translations are from the 19th century. There are 2 books that I'm currently reading and will continue reading in April. These are the books I'm planning to read in April. The first book is The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is a young adult fantasy and it's a sequel to Six Crimson Cranes. Six Crimson Cranes was one of my favorite books last year, so I'm really excited to read the sequel. The next book I want to read is Virgil's Aeneid. The next is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I started this in March and will finish this in May. The last book is Medea by Euripides. This is my favorite ancient Greek tragedy, and this particular edition has 4 different translations as well as essays on the tragedy. Let me know in the comments what was your favorite read in March and what your reading goals for April are, and I'll see you in my next video.